Alright, so today in Illustrator I'm going to get you started with creating a new document and then also how to start manipulating your shapes. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go over to Create New. And then you don't need to worry about any of this is blank, that's totally fine. What I'm going to do over here is I'm going to make sure that I name my file so you guys can find it. I'd like for you guys to name it last name, oops, if I can spell, underscore, and then just say demo, just so you know it's your demo file. I'd like to give us some space to work with on, so we're going to do 11 inches and then make sure that this is set to inches. You'll notice that there are a lot of other options here, but we need to make sure that's in inches. And we're going to do an 11 inch by 11 inch square, so your width and height should say 11 inches. Orientation doesn't matter because we're doing a 1-to-1 ratio, and the number of artboards right now doesn't matter either. Everything else you can leave the same. We're going to go ahead and say create. And it'll open up a new document for you. I'm going to be using some key commands. So to zoom in and out on a Apple product is going to be Command plus or minus. And then you can also fit it right to the screen by saying Command 0. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to open my reference image that I'm going to be working with. You can do Command 0 Command O, the letter O, or you can go up to File and go down to Open. What's really nice about Illustrator is it has all of the key commands that you could ever need listed right next to the thing that you're going to be clicking on. So a lot of times if I use something repeatedly, I go ahead and I use that. So let's say Open. And I've saved it right here onto my desktop, which is that really cool example that we looked at. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and you can either go to View and go down to zoom in or zoom out, and then once again your key commands. So if you're on a PC, you'll notice that your key commands will be listed there. On a Mac, it's the Command plus or minus. So I'm going to zoom out a little because my image is a little bit bigger than what I'm working with. I'm going to make sure that I'm on my selection tool, which is, you can also hit the letter V on your keyboard. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize it. So I'm going to click on it, and you'll notice that the bounding boxes will come up, which is these blue handles. So as I hover over the edge, one thing that you do need to make sure that you do is hold down Shift. So as I hold down Shift, that's keeping my proportions the same, and then I can just click inside. I'm going to go down just a little bit more, and there we go. And once again, Command 0 brings it up to full screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create silhouettes made out of this diagram that I found. It's got a white background with, and even though these objects are in color, we'll be able to make some pretty interesting silhouettes pretty quickly. So I'm going to select it, which means I'm going to use my black arrow just to click on it, and I'll know it's selected because the blue bounding box comes up. And then once I do that, my options will come up right here. So what I'm going to say is image trace, but before I do that, you'll notice right next to image trace is a little down arrow. I'm going to click on that. And about 2/3 of the way down is the option for silhouette. So I'm going to click on silhouettes. And depending on how complex your image is, it'll take a little while. So this did a pretty good job. This is the shape that I want to kind of pull and work with right now. So what I'm going to do is, it's still selected because I've got that blue bounding box. And here's the thing that you absolutely need to do. You need to click on expand. So I'll click on expand. And now what it says, it's created vectors, which are infinitely scalable mathematical equations. So now I'm able to kind of go in and manipulate and kind of play with things. So the shape I really want to work with is this one. And you'll notice if I just click one time, it selects everything. I actually want to double click. And then what happens is that you kind of go into a group, and I'll talk more about that later. I can see that's the only thing selected because you guys can see that it's all selected in blue. What I'm going to do right now is I'm going to copy it. So I'm going to go Command C, or I can go up to Edit and say Copy, Command C, you'll notice is right there. And now I'm going to go back into my other tab, which was my original document that I was going to work with in. And you can do Command V, or you can go up to Edit and you can say Paste. Now I can do a couple things at this point. One of the things I can do is I can make it bigger. So once again, I'm going to hold down Shift. And as I hold down Shift, you'll notice that it's not distorting it. If I don't hold down Shift, what will happen is it will get distorted. So this is probably the only project where you could really play with distorting and playing with it. If I do anything that I don't like, let's say that I accidentally did this and I clicked off of it and I'm like, oh no, that looks hideous. Why did I do that? You can always do Command Z to undo whatever you've done, and you can go back quite a few steps. Or I can also go up to Edit, and then I can go down to Undo Scale, which is that first option right there. And then you'll notice that the key command is listed there as well. The other thing that I can also do is I can also repeat a shape. So let's say that I wanted to I really like this idea of what this shape looks like, just this part, which looks pretty cool. I can also hold down Option on a Mac, and what that does is it makes a direct duplicate. You'll notice that my mouse turns into a double mouse, and I'll click and drag and I'll let go, and now I can make as many copies as I want. I can kind of play with what that looks like, where I'm placing it. So that's a really quick, easy way that you can kind of go through. You can make copies, you can scale things. We'll also be talking about in class how to take elements apart. So right here, everything is kind of like grouped together. We'll talk about the eraser tool a little bit. Or let's say that you really just kind of want this element and you only want to play with that element. We can go to the eraser tool, which the key command for that is Shift E. And I can use my bracket keys to make my brush bigger or smaller. And let's say that I really don't want kind of this bottom area. I just want that top area. So I'm going to go through, and of course I'll talk in class a little bit better how to refine it. And then you'll notice once I've done that, now I just have this element. And I can go in and clean some things up, changing the size of it. So now I can also rotate it. So let's say that I really wanted to kind of rotate it and play with it. I can do things like that now as well. The other thing that I can also do is we talked about reversing things out. So another thing that you guys will play with a little bit farther down is going to be your shape tools. So we talked about rectilinear shapes, and so I can click and drag, and you can see I can make something very long and narrow. I can also hold down Shift to make a perfect square. Once again, I can go back to my selection tool, and if I use the Option key, I can go and I can make duplicates. So if I wanted to make something like a pattern, and you'll notice that Illustrator is super helpful in terms of giving us these pink lines that are showing us that are lining up correctly. We can also rotate these the same way. We can scale them in different ways. We can combine them together, which we'll talk about a little bit later with Pathfinder. I can also, if I click and hold any of the tools, I have additional options that show up. So Adobe likes to kind of nest things within other things. So I have my ellipse tool, and you'll notice that it'll give me ovals. If I hold Shift once again, that'll give me a perfect circle. And once again, I can click, and I can also go to the polygon tool. As you're using the polygon tool, if you want to add or take away more sides, let's say you want to do a triangle, you can go over to your arrow keys, and if you go down, that takes away a number of sides, and if you go up, that adds sides. So right now I'd like to do a triangle, and I'd also like for it to be at a correct angle, so I'm going to hold down Shift, and now I've got some triangles that I can work with. And once again, we can hold down Option and make lots of duplicates of these. Another tool is also the star tool. This is pretty cheesy, so I recommend that it's kind of I wouldn't recommend just the 5-star one. You can also use your arrow keys, and you can add sides to your star if you want to. And so this will allow you to kind of go in, you can move your shapes around, you can make more shapes, you can rotate your shapes. You can also select multiple shapes at the same time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click and drag, and you'll notice that they're all selected. I can move them around. I can also scale them all at the same time if I wanted to. And these are all things that we're going to practice doing. So these are our basic ways of moving shapes around and building shapes in Illustrator. Before I leave, what I'm going to do is I'm going to save. So I'm going to go File and go to Save, or I can do Command S, and that will save it as well. Make sure that you're saving as